Clara Hayes expected her grandmother's brooch in the velvet box, restored by the trusted Alistair Finch. But inside was only a small, sealed urn labelled Preservation Residue. Confusion turned to dread as she shook it, just the sound of dust. The brooch and her family's legacy had vanished. The box of dust was not just a mistake, it was a warning, and Clara's search for answers was just beginning. Alistair Finch's shop, Heirloom Restorations, thrived on word of mouth. In quiet suburbs, his name was a whispered secret among friends. To be his client was to join an exclusive circle. Finch was more than a craftsman. He was a confidant, a keeper of family secrets. Women trusted him with their most precious heirlooms, believing he understood their sentimental value. The process was always the same. A referral, a warm smile, a sense of belonging. His shop felt like a sanctuary, filled with antique tools and quiet expertise. Finch's reputation was his shield. No one questioned his methods. He preferred clients who had recently inherited jewelry, guardians of legacy, eager to preserve memories. Each story shared, each memory recounted, deepened the trust. The referrals multiplied, creating an echo chamber of praise. No one doubted the man everyone else trusted. Behind the charm, however, a different kind of work was being done. Finch's greatest asset was the trust he so carefully cultivated. It allowed him to operate without suspicion, and as the circle of trust grew, so did the scale of his betrayal. The betrayal was crafted as carefully as the heirlooms he claimed to restore. At Heirloom Restorations, the intake process was meticulous and by design. Clients filled out detailed forms describing their jewelry's history and sentimental value. Finch photographed every piece, capturing engravings, clasps, and stones. He claimed it was for documentation, but it was also a blueprint for deception. Clients brought old photos, unknowingly providing the perfect guide for replicas. All records were filed in handsome folders, reassuring clients their treasures were safe. But the very system meant to protect them became evidence against Finch. The forms and photos, intended as a safety net, became a paper trail of his crimes. Investigators would later use these records to expose his fraud. Finch's attention to detail helped him create convincing fakes and left an undeniable archive. Each file was proof of an original that vanished in his care. The process that built trust also built the case against him. Every signature, every photo was another link in the chain. The paper trail was his undoing. The architecture of trust became the blueprint of his downfall. Doubts began as whispers. A ring felt lighter, an engraving seemed shallower. Clients dismissed their concerns, trusting Finch's expertise. When urns labelled Preservation Residue appeared, Finch explained it was the result of necessary restoration. Most accepted this, believing it showed respect for their history. But subtle differences nagged at some. A brooch that hung wrong, a locket that clicked too sharply. The replicas were beautiful, but too perfect, lacking the warmth of the originals. For those who knew their heirlooms intimately, something felt off. Amelia, one client, noticed her mother's locket felt different, the chain, the hinge, the weight. She confronted Finch, who calmly explained that restoration sometimes required new parts. His answers were always plausible, always soothing. Clients doubted themselves, reassured by his confidence, but the little imperfections added up. The urns, the subtle changes, the sense of loss, they became impossible to ignore. The trust that shielded Finch began to crack. The perfect replicas were, in truth, imposters. The soul of the originals was gone, and for some the realization was devastating. The betrayal was hidden in plain sight. The master's touch was a master's lie. The circle of trust was beginning to unravel. The first cracks had appeared, and soon the truth would break through. Clara Hayes refused to accept the urn as closure. She called the police, showing them the urn and photos of her grandmother's brooch. The contrast between Finch's reputation and the box of ashes was too strange to ignore. The pattern was clear. Finch wasn't restoring heirlooms, he was replacing them. Finch, trusted to preserve memories, was stealing them instead. Clara's determination exposed a web of lies. The truth was out. The real story of heirloom restorations was finally coming to light. Armed with evidence, police searched heirloom restorations. The front was charming, but the workshop was a factory for forgeries. Investigators found modern casting equipment, molds, and 3D printers. Dozens of rubber molds matched client files, labeled with names and dates. Invoices revealed bulk purchases of cheap materials. Hundreds of empty ceramic urns and a label maker for preservation residue were ready for use. In a locked cabinet, they found several original heirlooms, some not yet replaced, but most, including Clara's brooch, were gone. A crucible contained traces of melted gold, platinum and sapphire. Finch wasn't just stealing, he was destroying the originals, erasing them forever. The most chilling find was a ledger, detailing each item's weight, composition, and the ashes returned. The urn's contents were dust from his machines, a final insult. Every step of his fraud was meticulously documented. The evidence was overwhelming. The workshop was a monument to betrayal. The trusted craftsman was exposed as a calculated thief. The truth was undeniable. The legacy of his victims had been turned to ash. As the investigation deepened, a chilling discovery emerged. Police cross-referenced Finch's clients with missing persons reports. Eleanor Vance, a key referrer, had vanished after an appointment at Finch's shop. Her car was found abandoned. She was never seen again. The case shifted from fraud to something far darker. Forensic analysis of the urns revealed biological matter, incinerated human bone. DNA tests confirmed a partial match to Eleanor in one urn. Finch's workshop, with its high-temperature kiln, was capable of cremation. The implications were horrifying. Finch hadn't just stolen jewelry, he'd returned human remains to his clients. The urns were no longer just symbols of loss. They were evidence of a monstrous crime. The trusted antique dealer was now a murder suspect. The investigation intensified. The circle of trust had become a circle of horror. The truth was more terrible than anyone imagined. The little urns were tiny coffins. Investigators re-interviewed Finch's clients and uncovered a disturbing pattern. The women who received urns with human remains were those who had asked questions, who doubted Finch's work. When clients got too close to the truth, Finch escalated, silencing them with horror. He preyed on the emotionally vulnerable, using their grief and trust as weapons. Each stolen heirloom was a story erased, a legacy destroyed. The replicas became tainted reminders of betrayal. Many victims couldn't bear to keep them. The emotional cost was immeasurable, a theft of history itself. Finch sold the melted gold and gems, funding his respectable facade. He lived off the liquidated memories of others. The preserver of history was its most ruthless destroyer. His betrayal was total. Property, trust, and memory all corrupted. The investigation revealed the true scale of his crimes. The void he left could never be filled. The legacy of his victims was lost forever. The story of Alastair Finch is about more than stolen gold. He stole the irreplaceable memory, trust, and connection. For his victims, heirlooms were lifelines to the past, not just objects. Clara wanted her grandmother's presence at her daughter's wedding. Amelia wanted her mother's touch. Finch stole those moments, turning trust into a weapon. The trial exposed his crimes. Replicas beside old photos, the contrast stark. Victims testified, voices trembling, about the deep violation they felt. They lost more than jewelry. They lost identity and roots. The legacy they hoped to pass on was turned to ash. Restoration, in Finch's hands, was a mask for destruction. He buried the past instead of reviving it. The most valuable things are not gold or silver, but memory and trust. When trust is broken, the loss is absolute. The empty boxes and silent urns are all that remain. Some things, once lost, can never be restored. They can only be mourned.